Hello, my lovelies. So, I'd just like to talk about this one behind me while it's still fresh on the mind. So, it started with what seemed like really quite chaotic, random gestural sort of marks that when you look at it doesn't look like much at all. And there were lots of things that were happening there, and what I was letting happen was the noise of my imagination just flow. And my imagination has always been quite noisy. Noisy is probably the wrong word, just lots of things happening at once. Um, it's a bit of a cacophony, I suppose. Anyway, it was all flying past, and as things were happening, I was catching hold of them and making marks. So I wasn't really present with the canvas, I was inside my head drawing the things that were sort of flying through. And then I stopped and I stepped back. When I started to go in with colour, my intention largely was to start trying to make sense of some of that chaos, I guess, by making some of those, um, some of that rambling into more coherent shapes, or at least less complicated shapes with colour. I was certainly looking for a bit of a balance between the cools and the warms. It's quite a cool palette anyway. Like even the yellow is a cad yellow, which is a cooler yellow. Um, which is fine. I find that just a three colour primary palette is magnificent because no matter what happens, you tend to find harmonies. Even the mud that sort of gets mixed up when you start to do the wet on wet, which is what happened later in this painting, even that sort of, there's something quite beautiful about it. Anyway, by the time I just about finished blocking this whole thing and essentially getting the white off the canvas, something was starting to happen, and I guess I was starting to get into that painter's trance, and I just started making marks. And for me, when I am without thought, when something is just happening like that, that is the most peaceful, the most joyous, the most beautiful place that I can possibly be in. And what was interesting with that is the place that I seemed to go and the things that I was sitting on was a rock that I had in John Forest National Park. And I'll talk more about this rock, as time goes on. But effectively, I grew up in a quite an abusive, emotionally abusive household, and I had a manic depressive mother who was just all over the place. Would fly off the handle, be off for weeks, months. You didn't want it to get happy inside the house because the moment it was happy, you knew that shit was about to hit the fan. Anyway, often when shit was hitting the fan, I had a spot in the national park that I'd disappear to. And one good thing about growing up around that kind of thing is you have a lot of freedom. You can come and go as you like, and I was very much raised myself in that regard. Uh, but I had this rock that I'd sit on, and I always thought that it was just like the coolest thing that I could just go and hang out and be on this rock, and nobody knew where I was, and nobody knew what I was doing. Um, but I always looked at it with really sort of positive thoughts, and I realised, in that moment of painting, while I was kind of in this trance, that I was actually probably quite sad and maybe quite scared, and maybe all these other things that as a child you're not necessarily equipped to recognize in that moment. But what I was doing while I was painting was allowing myself to feel sad for that little boy version of me that was sitting on that rock, that was telling myself that my situation was so cool because I could go anywhere and do anything anytime I liked. No one was going to stop me. Um, and yeah, so as the marks kept happening, a face started to come through, and I think that faces often do come through with the abstract stuff. For me, is for whatever reason, just having a couple of eyes in an abstract work, or even a single eye, adds some kind of sentience. It certainly increases my experience or enhances my experiences as a viewer, uh, or as the person painting the thing that's being viewed. I guess I'm viewing it as it's being painted. Uh, but yeah, this is not a sob story. I felt it felt really cathartic, and it felt really beautiful afterwards. And it was just nice to shine a different light on that memory, which I think is something that's sort of coming up through these counselling sessions. I don't think it's rewriting my narrative, but it's certainly allowing me to see things in a different light, and it's lifting certain things and moving certain things And that's what this painting did for me last night. So the title of this painting is Learning How to Unfuck Thyself. And I guess there are times that, you have what are happy memories that it's not true happiness, it's not deep happiness, it's a happiness that you've put there as a mask. And I'm not saying that happiness is always a mask, but it was really powerful for me to go back to that particular memory, which I didn't intend to go back to, it just sort of happened. And lift that veil. So yeah, that was this one. That was this painting. I think you can see that. I think you can see some of the sadness and some of that innocent little boy. And it's really cool. It was really cool that happened. Something different happens in all the paintings. But yeah, let's see what happens with the next one. I might have a whole show worth of, therapy paintings. Seems fitting, doesn't it? It's quite a common theme, isn't it? The suffering artist. Mind you, I'm feeling very light, so there you go. Anyway, that's us for today. Turu, I'll see you tomorrow.